Welcome into the Toyota Lounge for the DNVR Avalanche Podcast, powered by your Front Range Toyota dealerships. We got Megan, we got Eric, we got RyJo coming to you live. We're talking about the weaknesses of the Colorado Avalanche today, where they might be exploitable by other teams. Before we get into that, though, we do have a handful of news items to get to. Starting with today's stuff, two things. First of all, Edmonton didn't match either of the offer sheets, so both Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway are going to St. Louis. Okay, on Edmonton's side, solves their cap issues, so at least there's that for them, losing two players. For St. Louis's side, I don't know how much better they really get made by those two moves. We'll see if that $4.5 million or whatever it is for Broberg is... They better be right. We'll put it that way for St. Louis, because their defense is already bad, and if he's not any good, they're in trouble. That was just kind of a news that happened. News that sort of pertains to the Avs today. Ryan Johansson getting his contract not bought out, but terminated, but maybe not, because he's going to file a grievance against it. So it's not exactly clear how that will play out, but a former Av, and the other side of this is, if this does play out in the Flyers' favor and they are allowed to fully terminate Johansson's contract without any cap hit or any repercussions, you would have to think if the Avs wanted to do that with Val Nichushkin, they would be able to. Because certainly in Johansson's case, it sounds like there was a breach of contract surrounding his injury that kept him from playing last season and kept them from sending him down. I don't know the exact details, but if that's a breach of contract, you have to think Val breached contract by failing a drug test.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's the emoji, right? You know what I mean? Like, who knows, right? Because whenever there's litigation involved, or obviously that's what's going to happen. I'm talking about with RyJo. It stems from his trade from here. I know he's an ex-Av, but he's also the Avalanche are the team that traded him, to Philly. And his last game played was in the NHL was as an Avalanche, right? So there's something we're missing. Obviously, we don't know all the pieces. It sounds like Philly said they're going to stay quiet and have no further comment, but will be willing to present a case if they're asked to. You know what I mean? Yeah. Which I believe at some point they will, and that's basically what they were saying. They knew what they were doing in the sense that they're like, you know what, we're terminating him. There's a breach of contract. And when you're doing that, you're going to have a fight, right? I mean, of course, the fight's going to come from the PA. Of course, the fight's going to come from his representation, which is normal. They're normal things. It's not the first time, not the last time. Now, did the Avs get involved in there? I'm not saying they want to get involved, but they might be called in, you know what I mean? Because I just said it. RyJo had an Avalanche sweater on his back the last time he touched the ice in the NHL, right? So, I mean, they're involved somehow. I'm not saying there was shady play. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they're involved somehow. Did he have an injury? Did he not have an injury? What was going on? And, I think Philly knew all along. I don't think this is something new that popped in today. I think it was more like this has been going on for a while, and now, it just came out today, and they're moving forward. And now, as far as Val's concerned, you throw your hands up in the air, same thing. You know what I mean? Like, what can you do? And that C-Mac and Joe and everyone are looking at everything, from status quo, and he's a player, to let's terminate it. And then, again, whenever you terminate something, you're going to have a fight on your hands. And there's always two sides to every story, and that's okay. That's a lot of money. RyJo, it's it's only 1 year. Yeah, it's $8 million. That's a lot of money. And then of course Val, it's a little more complicated with multiple years, right? So it is what it is. And you know what? You wait to hear what happens, and they tell you next what the verdict was, and you go from there.
I think with the involvement of the PA and Val situation, it might make it a little more complicated.
For sure.
But going back to the Avs' involvement in this Ryan Johansson business, I know people were critical of McFarland following the trade, almost accusatory that this was some shady business on the Avs side, but Ryan Johansson played up until the trade. And if anything, if the Avs are brought into the fold in whatever happens next. I think it's to validate that there is something unusual around the disclosure of injury on Ryan Johansson's side or in his care team, but he played in an Avalanche uniform up until the trade. It's really hard to look to the Avs and say that they did something weird to make Ryan Johansson unable to play as soon as he got to Philadelphia. You know, it just doesn't seem like this is going to end badly for the Avs. I know it looks a little bit weird, but I just don't think that's the kind of organization that the Avs are, and I think this will help to clear the air a little bit.
Yeah, I don't see how anything comes back on the Avs in this situation. At the end of the day, it's a player's choice to play or not. And even if he was injured, it's not like the Avs are saying, "Oh, you have to play."
I think they would have been happy if he needed to take a few nights off.
No, exactly. We're all on the same page, and I wasn't, assuming that the Avs had done some shady business. And I'm not saying you were saying I was saying that. I'm saying the Avs will be called in because he's the last team. This is the last time that he played hockey in the NHL, right? You know, so they will be called in somewhere, somehow. You know, but I agree, there was no shady business on my knowledge, you know, from the Avalanche.
Yeah. So the reason I bring this up is because, let's be honest, you look at the Avs roster, and one of those biggest weaknesses they have today is that hole in the top six left by Val. We don't really know how that situation is going to play out still. Obviously, you guys talked with Pat Carnes yesterday. The Jared Bednar interview yesterday sounds like there's some pretty good feels around Landeskog at the moment that he might be able to place that spot early in the season. But on the flip side of that Bednar interview also indicated that Arturi Lehkonen might not be ready for the start of the season. So is concern number one that wing spot for Colorado, or do you think there's a bigger one on the docket for the Avs?
Well, I agree what you just said, and I'm looking at my notes right here, and it's exactly that. It's the uncertainty. Again, we've talked about it at everything we touch on Avalanche-wise since the end of the season comes back to one thing. It comes back to the handcuffs that C-Mac and the crew have because of the situation, a unique situation in Val and a unique situation in Gabe. And it's not being repetitious. It's just a reality. It handcuffed them a little bit when it came down to free agency. It's going to handcuff them a little bit when it comes down to their 23-man roster. And then it handcuffs you when it comes down to, making trades. You go back now to how huge the signing of Joe Drouin was. It's huge looking back at it now. You know what I mean? Because now, if you hadn't signed Drouin, then he would have been hungry, and him and Alan Walsh would have, looked elsewhere. You're in a deep hole. Like, I think you're in a hole right now. I think this is their biggest weakness. I agree. Can they figure, something out? Can they find a rabbit out of the hat? Maybe. Maybe. That's pro scouting. That's analytics. That's everything combined. And you try to find something that others won't find, and you go for it. Who knows what they're going to do? Now, there is a hole. Can that help a guy? And again, I don't know if he can play wing. I don't know if he's strong enough to play in the NHL. But we all know that their first pick, and not suited to be a fourth-line center, right? I mean, let's face it, But if that's where he needs to be, that's where he needs to be. But who knows what they're going to do with him? You have a little bit of flexibility there. But if I'm him, I'm licking my chops. And if I'm asked, hey, can you play the wing? Oh, I can do whatever you want me to do. You know what I mean? And that's what it is, right? Because that's so important. So, again, AJ's kind of touching on what I'm trying to say here. Someone's got to take the bull and run. You know what I mean? And run. Like I said, I'm alluding to Ritche here, but is it somebody else? I don't know. Or do you make one of those trades? Now, when you go back to Val, forget about Val right now. Put an X on him. We know he's not there at the start. So
certainly not for the first month. Yeah,
exactly. It's a hard date, right? So now, if you go to Gabe, it doesn't sound like he's going to be there. And the second part with Gabe, it's not just like will he play? It's at what level?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, at what? And again, big Gabe Landeskog fan here. I am not pushing it. Who knows? Time will tell. We don't know what level he's going to be. I hope he's the freaking same Gabe as well. That's awesome. Then it's a home run for himself, for his teammates, for the city, for the management. But you don't know to what level. So they are a bit weak. Absolutely, they are a little bit weak right now. And someone's got to be licking their chops right now and say, hey, you know what? I'll be that guy that didn't think that I would be that guy, but I'm going to be that guy. Who knows who it's going to be? But the first guy that thinks, pops in my head is Cal Ritche. I don't want to hear, yeah, but he's a center. You know what? A lot of people have been drafted as centers, wingers, or whatever it is, and they end up playing a different position in the NHL. So I don't know. Maybe he is that guy. I have no idea. You don't know until you try it.
I think this is the most immediate concern for the Avs, is identifying how that top six looks to start the season, but it also feels like one that has some form of relief down the pipeline, and it's going to be a choice of a few options.
Yep.
But they're going to need clarity around Val Nichushkin eventually, and they're going to get it eventually. It's going to give them some kind of answer, whether that be Val Nichushkin returns and plays in an Avs uniform, some kind of trade is orchestrated, they're able to terminate his contract. Once that question is answered, it opens up cap space to better address this issue. That's also when I'm just pinning Gabriel Landeskog to attempt to return to the lineup. They also get clarity there.
Yep.
Can Gabriel Landeskog still play in the NHL? Can he fill a top six role still? But all of those answers come about more in the November and beyond timeframe. So for the month of October, this is where I get excited. It's not an ideal situation. That much is obvious. You'd love to just have Landeskog in the lineup and know that he'll be an option. But this is where, in addition to Cal Ritche, who I think is the number one guy, and I'm pinning him in a wing spot too, in the top six, just to try it out, but this is also Jean-Luc Foudy music. He's been playing wing. He has the skill set that is probably better suited for a middle six role in the NHL, but more of a depth role is all that's been available beyond this. If he could get opportunity, they can see what type of player they have in him temporarily in a second line role, and it's an audition to see if he could be more in the middle of the lineup down the line. And it's also time for us to see what Jean-Luc Foudy is. He's got the speed to keep up with a middle stat. I know that he's the type of player, too, who's going to want to drive inner ice and receive some of those passes that middle stat is setting up. It would be an intriguing look. I don't know where I stand on my confidence and what we're going to get out of the result, but it's the perfect opportunity to see. I even think back to Jonathan Drouin's first 10 games of the season, and I don't want to write off the Avs in the first part of their season next year, that they're going to be a little unserious in whatever they are, but there is probably going to be a lineup that is not going to be close to what you can expect come November, December timeframe. But for good reason. It's going to be an excellent look at some of these players that, especially at Cal Ritche, and just see how they stack up against NHL talent.
I love the Foudy call out. I do wonder, you put Foudy middle stat on a line, does that line start to get a little bit on the small side?
But fast.
Definitely can fly. And then, who do you put on that? If you end up putting Mikko on that other side, if he wants to play to his size, that makes up for a lot of the smallness. There are options there. I want to throw two other options out there for you for solving that spot for the first month of the season. Number one, and Megan, I know you've thrown this one out there before, Nikolai Kovalenko. Were they willing to give him that much opportunity as a guy in the lineup, especially after he was limited in the playoffs where, obviously had that big mistake in his second game and didn't see the ice again? Can he earn the trust of a Jared Bednar to put him in a role like that? And then number two, which is a little bit more complicated, but hear me out. I like Cal Ritche. I like where you guys head at with Cal Ritche making the team, but instead put Cal Ritche at 3C and put Ross Colton on the wing on that second line.
I love it. I got to be honest with you. You should be a GM right now. But that's exactly the conversations that are happening right now when people are coming back to work. When I say people, front office and coaches are going to get together here coming up. Have a few meetings here and there. Where are we at? Where we stand? What's going on? Who's playing those first preseason games? And then that is exactly what you said there. I hadn't thought about it. That's very awesome of you. And it's like exactly the type of thinking that's going on in the office. And that's probably what an example like that you're going to see in preseason. I think they are at that stage where they got to try stuff. You know what I mean? And I like it. I like it. You got to try stuff. You got to figure it out, because we all know you don't make the playoffs. It's that cliche, right? The first month of the season, but you can certainly get yourself out of it in the first month. So those games are crucial. They're important. Every game's important. Every 2 points is important. Now, if you think, you just say, oh, we'll just wait and see, and either we get clarity or we have room or whatever it is, it might be too late. So you got to figure out, you got to come up with some scenarios like you just did there, and that was a great one. And then I'm going to say a name here that's so funny because we don't even bring it up. Maybe Megan was going to bring it up. I wasn't. I had him as a, oh my God, no one's going to say anything about him, is Oscar Olofsson. I mean,
yeah,
it's amazing how I'm just saying, it's amazing how we just don't even talk about him. And me first. I'm talking about me. You know, I'm not a believer, and I just hope a guy like that comes and knocks on the door and just shatters it, and then is like, hey, I'm here too. So I don't know if any one of you were going to say his name, but I wasn't, because I'm not a believer. But man, oh man, I hope he proves me wrong.
I know you have to do an ad read.
Go ahead. It's fine.
No, I'll react to it after.
Okay. We'll jump into it. Maybe the key for all of this for the Avalanche is keeping yourself healthy. So make sure you're getting with UC Health and Coach Prime with the Ready, Set, Co initiative. You want to get in on this. The whole objective of the Ready, Set, Co thing is to get Colorado back to its rightful place as the healthiest state in the country. And you have Coach Prime as your lead chief motivation officer with UC Health. So get in on part of that, as the challenge involves not just, exercise and making sure you're taking care of your body in that way, but nutrition and mental health as well. It's the whole package when it comes to UC Health and the Ready, Set, Co statewide challenge. So jump on with Coach Prime. You really are what you eat, and make those small choices every single day so you can do things like swap out a side salad for fries or do a little planning around your meals, and it just makes it easier to make those good choices and keep yourself healthy. If you want to join UC Health's Ready, Set, Co challenge, click the link in the show notes or go to www.uchealth.org/ready-set-co. And once you're taking care of yourself, you're getting healthy and doing all that good stuff, make sure you're rewarding yourself with a nice car to drive around town with a Toyota. You can go to your Front Range Toyota dealerships today to get yourself in the official vehicle of DNVR with a Toyota. They have all sorts of different cars, something for everyone, whether it be the trucks like the Tundra or the Tacoma. They have SUVs like the RAV4. They have sedans is the word I'm looking for, like the Corolla. Whatever it is, Toyota has a vehicle for you, including 17 different all-wheel drive vehicles and 16 different hybrid vehicles. So they've got you covered on the road, off the road, wherever else you might be going. Hit up your Front Range Toyota dealerships for the official vehicle of the Colorado Avalanche and the official vehicle of DNVR. You can find them locally here at AutoNation Toyota, Arapahoe and Centennial, Corwin Toyota in Boulder, Groove Toyota in Littleton, Mountain States Toyota in Denver, Stevenson Toyota East in Aurora, and Stevenson Toyota West in Lakewood to get yourself into that official vehicle of the Colorado Avalanche. All right, Megan, the Avs options at that second line wing spot.
Well, I wanted to validate Cal Ritchie is 3C for a second, and it's because I do think without Arturi Lehkonen likely to start the season, though this was the timeline that we were given over the summer for Lehkonen and his off-season
It's not
shoulder
like he's
procedure.
delayed or anything.
No,
Yeah.
it was close to camp was the target we were given. I imagine it won't be so long after opening night, but counting him out of the top six, you start to get a little concerned about, because if it was some combination of like a Lehkonen and a Foodie up there, I don't know, I'd be intrigued by what that kind
There's
of
some
a line
responsibility
looks like.
with Lecky for
Exactly,
sure. Yeah.
which is why I like Logan O'Connor on a line with Cal Ritchie.
There you
for
go.
a third line. Miles Wood there doesn't. It's a neutral component, but I like the injection too of creativity that Cal Ritchie could bring to that line. It's not to say Ross Colton doesn't bring it, but I do think Ross Colton's services would be needed on that second line just so it's a more well balanced attack. And I feel comfortable. Put an asterisk by comfort.
As comfortable as you can be.
With Logan O'Connor working alongside Cal Ritchie, that's exactly the kind of player that he should be learning from. Those are some good habits.
Yep.
And then the Oscar Olausson conversation. I feel so much for the situation that he is in. He has just missed almost an entire season of hockey, rehabilitating a shoulder injury. And I don't know what that even looked like for his offseason, because at Dev Camp, he did not look 100% still.
Yeah, for sure.
He wasn't. And so that has been a significant amount of time, even toward an offseason that would have been so important for him going into this season, that has been hampered by injury. And so I want to tamper expectation around ALLCITY a little bit, but I also want to underpromise in hopes that he over-delivers as a result of this, because he needs to.
Yep.
He's in a really difficult position, but he hasn't done enough, and it's not entirely his fault. This last year, losing that time is hard, but he hasn't entirely done enough to earn the trust that's needed for me to put him in the second-line wing spot automatically. He's worked harder on aspects of his game that make him a better Avalanche player that Jared Bednar would be more interested in using. But there were still some things needed from both Foodie and ALLCITY in that right. And that's what I'm going to need to see from ALLCITY. It's not to say it's an impossible feat. It's just an incredibly difficult one for him because of the time that he missed.
All extraneous factors are good context, but at the end of the day for ALLCITY, look, you're drafted in the same spot as Cal Ritchie was. Go out there and look better than Cal Ritchie in training camp and preseason this year. Earn that job over somebody else. That's where it's at for me with him.
Yeah, and here's what I'll add to him about him. I always tell you guys, like silver spoons, right? First rounders are silver spooners. They are. They get every opportunity, deserved or not, they get it. Now, I say all the time, up to a few years into it, all bets are off. So now with him, he's still a young player, but it's been a few years, and he's been playing pro for a few years. So all bets are off. Now you're back to fighting for your friggin' spot. You're back to fighting for your, when I say spot, is your chance at getting a spot. So I think that's where he's at now, injured or not. That it's all part of it. You know what I mean? And just think how far and how quick guys fall. I'm just saying. You just tweeted Rudo about RyJo, right? You know, like your tweet was how far it's that quick in the NHL. How you can just be a silver spooner, a high priced, like, you know, obviously first round pick and shiny little toy, and then all of a sudden you're just like everybody else at the bottom of the bag, and you got to try to be picked, and you got to do some special, and sometimes like him, he got injured. Now it's like even a little bit deeper. And I'm not saying they've given up on him. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that reality is, you look now at the Cal Ritchie, that's shinier. It is shinier because it's newer, right? You know, so it's nicer. So you look for those guys, and you always want to prove your picks that you were right, and that's, you know, hence that silver spoon comment. But after a while, it is what it is, and you kind of move on from that, and then you get in the same barrel of everybody else. So we'll see what he's got. We'll see where he's at physically, and at the end of the day, they don't care. Jared Bednar doesn't care. It's, you know, he got injured. Oh, shit, it sucks. You know what I mean? No, it's, can he help me today?
Yep.
Right? Because you want to win today. We just talked about winning today, and that's what the National Hockey League is about. It's about winning today. And coaches, if they don't win today, they're fired tomorrow, right? So they don't have time to wait, and sucks she got injured. But it's a great point by Megan. You know what I mean? Like he has fallen that far behind a little bit now because of just not even play, but by injuries.
Yep. It can be unfortunate like that in the business of hockey sometimes. We do have a question here in the Toyota chat from Michael, who says, what is the time frame for LOC? Luckily, it sounds like, per Jared Bednar, that LOC will be good to go for the start of the season. So at least one positive injury note to talk about there that is a little more certain than Landeskog. We'll put it that way. Landy, you know, we're hopeful, but it's still been over 2 years for him. So we'll see.
Yeah, and him, he knows one way how to play, and that's north-south, and he goes, and he just gets after it. And just to add to your third C, you know, for the third-line center and Ritchie, like, you know, sometimes the easiest way to learn in the National Hockey League, even though you're a very skilled player like he is, sounds like he's going to be a skilled player in the National Hockey League because he is at, you know, obviously in juniors, and that's why he got drafted. But sometimes the easiest thing to do for you to adapt is to throw you with two freaking north-south guys. two wrecking balls, right? Miles Wood, him, and they just go and just simplify the game. Simplify the game. Keep it simple. Don't worry. Your creation once you get in the offensive zone will take over because that's what his strength is, right? Well, I mean, I think that's why they drafted him. He's creative and he's got skills. So, but as far as the other parts of the ice go, when you're playing with two guys like that, the puck's going to get out. The puck's going to get in. Then you just go and be creative, and sometimes it just makes things easier for you to learn, especially if he's thrust into that center position. Now, if he's asked to go play wing, I always say wing's the easiest position, right? You don't have to think much. It's an easier adaptation. You know what I mean? Centers have to think a little hard. They have to read a little more, right, than those guys. But so I mean, I think he's in a good spot. I think he's in a good spot to. And I think they will see if he can play the wing or if he can play center and see what he can do. They have him, so let's see what they can do with him.
Yep. Okay, I do want to move on to our next weakness, if you want to call it that. I guess that's the question I want to ask. Goaltending for the Colorado Avalanche. Certainly a question mark. I think it's hard to know what you're going to get out of Georgiev this season. He has one season with a .918, which is extremely solid, and one season with an .897, which is terrible. Granted, he recovered that .897 a little bit with a solid playoff run. But there are certainly still question marks. Is goaltending all the way to a concern for you for the Colorado Avalanche? I'll tell you,
Go
for
ahead,
me,
Megan.
not really.
Yeah, go ahead. You guys go ahead, yeah.
No, not among the other things we're talking about. It becomes a concern if Georgiev falls back into old habits of the regular season last year just because of the fragility of the mental side for goaltenders. But he rounded such an important corner in the playoffs. I'm not counting on that, and I'm excited for what Justus Annunen has to offer the Avs this upcoming season that we didn't get to see a full year of last year. He was hampered by injury at the start, and so I think we're going to get an even better look at Justus in this next season. I think these other areas are more concerning, and it's honestly the entirety of the forward group to some extent, right? It's the top six, but it's also
We'll get to the depth too, yeah.
And as a result of these things, the penalty kill.
Yeah, for sure.
Which could enter the goaltending conversation.
That's fair.
All right, here's what I'll say, and I'll keep it very short. And we all know my feelings on their starter. It's not strong. My take is, look at Kemper 2 years ago. Here's what I'll say. I was a Kemper believer, by the way, and I went on multiple. Actually.
Yeah, but you were a Georgiev believer until you weren't.
No, exactly. That's where I'm going at it. So I say Kemper. I don't think it was that important because the Avalanche were so good. They were so good on paper. I didn't think it mattered. I thought, just like the Red Wings, but it could win with average goaltending. You know what I mean? And no offense to their goalies back then, and no offense to Darcy Kemper. I was like, they can do it. Now, I don't think, especially right now with the holes that they have and the situations that they're in that we've been talking the last 30 minutes, I think goaltending becomes more important. My take on Georgiev, I'm not a believer. I was a believer. I am not a believer. I think people are allowed to change their minds. I've seen enough now to change my mind. And my mind is that the Avalanche, whoever plays the first game of the season this year, I'm assuming it's going to be him. It won't be that goalie the last game of the season. That's the take I'm going to take.
That's spicy.
I don't think he'll be the guy playing the last game of the season. And hopefully they're at the top of the mountain, you know what I mean, with that silver thing. So I'm not saying the Avs will have a bad season. I'm saying that I don't think he will be the guy there at the end. Now, is it Justus Annunen? I'm a big believer in. That's one. Two, is it somebody else? My reasoning for this is I'm seeing a lot, and I wasn't a fan of his, it was Grubauer. I see a lot of Grubauer, and I was like, there's no way Grubauer takes them to the promised land. And I think and he had great seasons. Grubauer, great seasons. Number one rated goalie, that was on the free agent market and everything. So, but I just didn't think he was going to be the guy that had it to make the Avalanche win. My take on him is, Georgiev, I don't think he has it. and I'm going to leave it at that. And what are the other options? There are no other options today. There are no other options today. You're going to say
That's true.
Askarov. I mean, Markstrom's and all those things are they're gone, right? So I think it's going to play itself out. I'm not saying he's a bad goaltender. Again, you know that. I went from saying that he was one of the greatest trades the last 5-7 years in the NHL, and I did believe that. Now I'm starting to look at it as more, okay, so it was a great trade. I wouldn't put it as one of the greatest trades in the last 5-7 years in the league. I just lost faith in him. Last year, I didn't like his season. I didn't like his playoff. Forget about not just the first game. It was okay. I mean, it's not. He didn't steal anything. I mean, I like goalies when they go and steal stuff, when they're asked to steal stuff. And, who knows what's going to happen? I don't know.
To your first point, I would say this. Georgiev does not have to be great, at least in the regular season this year. I said it earlier. His first season, I think, was a 918. Last year was an 897. You split the difference of that. If he gives the Avs like a 908 this year, the Avs will be just fine. They're a good enough team in front of him. If he can just give them an okay performance, that I wouldn't worry too much about it in the regular season. Playoffs, different beast. It's also a little too early to be predicting playoff things. So
yeah, even Hellebuck's fallible in the playoffs.
Exactly.
So it's hard to get ahead of ourselves. But I felt like goaltending on the whole last year I think it was a tricky year for goaltenders. I feel like
it was a lot down for sure.
Top and elite goaltenders also experienced a similar save percentage as Georgiev, particularly for the starters with the heavy workload.
Yeah.
Kind of in that range. I just felt like the averages on the whole were down.
There were a lot of 904s, 903s. Yeah.
Not to, I don't know, maybe that's what is that? Consolation prize? What am I thinking of?
I have no idea.
Not to excuse it, right? Like, not to say, so Georgiev's fine and has a free pass to not be good, but I did think it was a weird year for goaltenders.
Definitely was. Outside of a select few like Hellebuck in the regular season, there were a lot of goalies that had pretty low save percentage compared to their regulars. So,
and what I got on my notes right here, 2 seconds too, is I had it right here as a weakness, and you're gonna say this guy's nuts, but third goalie, I don't see it. I'm sorry. Like I see a bunch of goalies in the American League, but I don't see a real third goalie.
You're not a Mandolesi believer?
Well, I mean, it's from my hometown. I'm sure he's a great kid. That's it's not even about believing him. I think he's played 5 career games. So I'm just saying, I like to have again, I'm going to use him. I'm not saying it should be him. Martin Jones. I've always said that. It's your guy. It's an insurance policy that's in the minors. If something happens, he's going to clear waivers at the start because that's when you can clear guys.
Are you sure?
Well, I mean, Martin Jones did last year. A bunch of guys like that. What's his name? If he doesn't, then so then you tried. I mean, what are you going to do? But right now, they can't get picked up because they don't have a Martin Jones, so they can't lose a Martin Jones. But a guy like, remember the spicy pork and the French guy there? God, he played for the Rangers. Remember he came in the playoffs, and he came in the playoffs. Was that in Pittsburgh or for the Rangers or whatever it was? And then what'd you do? And he came in overtime. He goes, I just had spicy pork in between periods and broccoli. And God, what's his name? He's a goofy goalie. French guy. I'm having a blank right now.
No idea.
Again, he's been a third goal. He's been making $1 million a year the last 3-4 years. You know what I mean? Like guys like that. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying him or David Ritche last year ended up playing. Right? That was the third goal. He cleared waivers to start the year. Guys like that. Guys with a little bit of experience. I feel that there's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys. I think it's a weakness until I'm proven wrong, and then whoever gets called up plays and has a string of victory. And we're like, oh, you know what, Eric, shut your mouth. So
apparently it's Louis Domingue for the record.
There you go, Louis, French guy. I was having a blank. Louis Domingue, that type of guy. Guys that have 100 games, 200 games in the NHL. Kind of makes you sleep a little bit better at night.
I don't know. I'm not as obsessed with this third goalie thing as a lot of people are. If you get down to your third goalie, you're already struggling anyway. And if you desperately need a new third goalie, you can throw a 6th round pick at somebody and you're fine.
I feel like how they came about Prosvetov, I feel like there's a similar path to a goalie.
Yeah. But essentially what they did to get Mandolese, but if you don't like him, then get a different one, I guess. It's fine.
No, he's got no experience. That's it. He's got 5 games. That's it.
Eric's point is interesting. Isn't it weird, though? They usually at least have in the American League the guy
They
that's
do.
the veteran
That's very
goaltender
clear,
that's
yeah.
always waiting in the balance, and they don't. It's all young goaltenders in the pipeline
I'm
right
fine
now.
with it, though, to be honest.
Oh, I love it. I
It's
love
new.
it. I love the fight. I love the fight. I love the competition. I do. I really do. I don't know. I come from the frickin' scouting world too, and it's like, boy, oh boy, we've had discussions and we've been given examples of, oh boy, what a disaster that was by being not protected. So I don't know. Again, it's always when disaster strikes, right? So it never strikes right now because there's no games played. Nobody's getting pucks to the head or nobody's getting, injured in practice. So we'll see.
All right. I mean, I don't know. We'll see if the third goalie ends up mattering. I will say the Avs have played their third goalie every season for the last 5 years, at least a couple games. So they're going to play whoever it ends up being, most likely. But on that note, we are brought to you by Bet365. Make sure you use the DNVR 365 code when you use that QR code on screen to sign up for a new account with Bet365. When you use that DNVR 365 code, you will get $150 in bonus bets when you bet $5 on anything. So do that, get $150 to play around with, have some fun on there. Maybe you'll win some money. Maybe you'll lose some money, but that's fake money, right? It's free money. Bonus bets. Bet on whatever you want, whether it be baseball, you can bet on preseason football. I'm sure you can bet on some of the futures in hockey already too. Cale Makar for the Norse, easy slam dunk, home run, guaranteed problem, no doubt. I don't know. I'm out of ways to say Cale's going to win it. So do that. Do it with Bet365. And, of course, when you do gamble with Bet365, you must be 21 or older, physically located in Colorado. And if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER today. After you win some money on Bet365, make sure you also have a real, steady stream of income with a real job, not betting. Go get on Indeed. And if you're hiring, you definitely need Indeed. When you jump on with Indeed, you'll be given access to 350 million global visitors. That is by Indeed's own internal data. So that's like a ridiculous amount of people that could potentially get hired by you. You can ditch all the busy work. You can use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites. So jump on with Indeed, and listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/AllCity. That's Indeed.com/AllCity. If you go there right now, let them know we sent you over there. Help support this podcast. Indeed.com/AllCity. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. You need Indeed. Third period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast. I want to quickly touch on the defense. I just don't think that that's really a weakness at all for the Avalanche. But is there any concerns with the Avs decor for you guys right now?
Minorly, just Cale's health holding up and
Sure.
feeling good, but that's such a small concern.
Well, you could also point to anybody and be like, health could be a problem.
Josh Manson. Yes.
Calvin DeHaan on that list too, for sure.
Yeah.
So outside of uncontrollable injuries, I'm with you. It's,
They're pretty stacked to answer for any possible absences
that's
here
true.
and there.
They're 8 deep basically.
Hopefully
so.
nothing serious.
So hard to argue.
The way Cale was banging that cowbell at his wedding there, he was, I think he's fine. He's fine. He'll be fine.
Get out of here,
More
size
now.
Queen AJ.
Yeah, no.
Oh God. No,
They're
I'm
fine.
good. I'm
Okay.
good.
I
A lot of
figured as
choices, a
much.
lot of depth. Yeah, a lot
Yep.
of depth. We're good.
So move on then to the other main part of the forward core that you might see as a concern, which is that forward depth. And I don't think their forward depth is terrible, particularly once you get into December and you have a better idea of what your top six looks like and how that trickles down the lineup. But you look at that bottom line specifically, and at this point we don't know, will Cal Ritchie make the team? What does that 4C spot really look like? Are you comfortable giving regular minutes to someone like a Kiviranta? Well, how does Parker Kelly fit into this whole conversation in the bottom six? Is it concerns or is it more just unknowns again?
I mean, there is some. There is a hole at 4C. We all know that, right? Wagner is more a call up for me, even though I
Yeah.
respected his career to this point. He's a very serviceable guy to pitch a few innings, I think. You know what I mean? But can they do better? I think they'd like to do better. I think it's been a hole there for a little bit. It's not. Some people think it's easy to find. It's not that easy to find. Um, the most logical one is a guy that wins draws, can play limited minutes, and can be trusted in any situation. So I mean, there's not that many of them. You know what I mean? So it doesn't look like they were able to find some in the UFA market. We knew it was small. I don't know. We'll see what the waiver wire brings. We'll see what a trade can bring. But man, oh man, like it's glaring. And not only Cogliano retiring and moving on, but I'm not knocking Cogs by any means. Outstanding career, but not the best face-off man on the PK, for example, right? So I do believe that it is a weakness of theirs. The face-off circle on the PK. It was a struggle last year. Need to address. Would I put that as alarming? No, but it is a concern. And who internally can fill that void? I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know. But if you're a young guy, you look at it, and that's where you fix that spot, and you're like, you know what? I'm going to go after it. And I'm going to take that spot. Who can do that? I don't know. I don't know. But it is a glaring hole. Can it be overcome? Absolutely. But the more and more you go deep in the playoffs, the more tough and the more glaring that hole gets.
I think it's going to be hard to find a fourth line as effective as a Helm, OC, Cogliano once upon a time. And that's a reality I can swallow for Colorado, but they haven't seen anything nearly as effective since then. And I don't worry so much about the unknowns, but what I do know. And I do feel like I know what Chris Wagner is. I know what Joel Kiviranta is. I don't mind Kiviranta being in the NHL lineup, but I know what he is. I feel like I know his limitations. Same for Chris Wagner. I feel similarly to Eric that he's more of a great guy for a call-up opportunity, but not a guy that I want in night after night. And it's going back to that efficacy conversation of what the fourth line was in the 2022 Cup run and how they're just so far removed from that. And they have to make some sacrifices in their lineup to keep their core intact. And I think that comes about in the form of the fourth line. But there are question marks that I do think are hopeful, and that's Kovalenko. I think he could be an intriguing piece on the fourth line if he works out there. I think that his tool set is geared for a fourth line role. And I don't want to pencil him in there forever. It just feels like it could be a great opportunity for him, and I would get more excited around that than I would a Chris Wagner or Kiviranta or Jure Anala and Parker Kelly. It doesn't move the needle yet for me, but they always come in with that sneaky late off-season move like, oh my gosh, his name, Tomas Tatar, and then previously Stanley Cup champion Evan Rodriguez. And so I'm expecting something like that, and that changes it for me if it moves the pieces in the bottom six a little bit to render that fourth line a little bit more full of full-time NHLers, whereas now it's looking a little bit fringy.
It especially looks thin when you start considering what happens in December when you're down a couple of injured players in that bottom six. And to be honest, this is where opportunity again springs forth for a John-Luc Foudy, or maybe at a depth role, maybe it's someone more like a Jason Polin or something like that. But
yeah, and that's why, like, remember in Vegas and Belmar ended up signing here, right? The Avalanche. Like, I'll use a name, and if I was GM in the NHL, this guy, I mean, would have a job for the next 20 years, and he'd be making $10 million a year. I've been banging the drum on him for years.
Well, you're not going to be a GM for very long then.
No. I haven't said the name yet. I'm not talking about Belly. I said an example. I'm talking about Thomas Nosek. Every year, I'm like, that's the guy. That's the
Okay.
fourth line center that wins faceoffs, that makes no money. When I say no money, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
850,
If you give a 4C
900.
$10 million, you're fired immediately. I don't care.
I know
whose
that's
name
what I'm
it is.
saying. That's my point. Like I bang the drum for Thomas Nosek every year. Teams I work for, and it's like he finds jobs every year, and it's always a 1 or 2 year deal. I'm like, God damn it, man! If I was GM, I'd give him a 10-year deal. You know what I mean? Like because I don't want to be looking for a 4C. You know what I mean? And every year he finds jobs and he wins draws. He's smart on the PK. You can get caught on the icing out there. It doesn't matter. You can play against the opposition's top lines, and a guy like that, but they're not that many. And I don't understand why a guy like that doesn't make more money. But whatever, he scores 2 goals a year. I'd give him more money. I should be his agent.
You should be his agent at this point. You kind of briefly mentioned the transition of this conversation because your fourth line is going to play, especially in Colorado, 8 minutes a night. Bednar definitely doesn't use them a ton, especially if they're not the trusted veterans or whatever you want to call it. So it's not a ton of minutes there, but where it could definitely make a difference for the Avs is, of these guys, who can PK? Can Kovalenko PK? Parker Kelly's probably going to PK for them, I assume. But this is how I don't know if this is a concern necessarily, but it could end up being one. Because the penalty kill, it feels like this is an opportunity zone for these guys. Whichever one of these guys can prove they can PK is going to earn a little bit more in that bottom six, or maybe earn a bottom six spot in the first place. But the reality is their PK needs to not completely implode in the middle of the season like it did last year.
It's already hurting.
Yeah.
No Cogliano.
True.
No Lehkonen to start the season. No Val Nichushkin for the
First
near
month at
future.
least. Yeah.
They're hurting
Yep.
in the immediate, and so that could be the difference maker in somebody getting an NHL job.
Yeah, PK for me is all about one word, and the word is from the coaching staff to players is trust. You know what I mean? And that's it. And you only make a first impression once, right? And unfortunately, I said it, and I'll say it again. It's not about being patient in the NHL when you're coaching. Of course, you guys got to have a little bit of a happy medium, but if somebody comes in, whether it's a Kovalenko or Parker Kelly or whatever it is, and all of a sudden in preseason you make an impression where it's like, oh boy, and all you see is this when the coach watches the video, you're in deep shit. To make your way back there. So it's like it's all about making a first impression. It's all about having the coaching staff trust you. And then you go out there and do it. But there's jobs to be won there. Absolutely. There's jobs to be won right there in the National Hockey League with the Avs this season, especially at the start, with the little hole that they have there. As it come down to, I do believe Ross Goaltending for me should PK more. You know what I mean? I do believe guys like that should. Remember we talked about Woody. We talked about guys. LOC will be back now. Of course, he's been gone since, what was it, February last year? So it's been a while, right? So, but there's jobs to be won, and you can make a career out of doing that. Again, I say it again. I used Yeller all the time back then. It's you gotta embrace the opportunity that's in front of you, and you gotta go and be part of the nest. And if that's what that is, and it's not as glorifying as scoring 50 goals, then you gotta go and be that guy. And someone or two are gonna have to do this, especially at the start for the Avalanche.
I fully agree. I mean, they just need their PK to be better to lessen the load on their offense a little bit as much as anything, which is kind of the last thing I wanted to get into on this show. When you look at last year, look, the Avs did some incredible stuff in the regular season last year. They had the most comebacks in franchise history in a year, I think. 3-goal, 4-goal comebacks. Ridiculous amount of comebacks, which is great that they have that in the bag. But they have to make their lives a little bit easier on themselves this year. You can't, it just is going to wear you out to keep coming back night after night after night like that. And that comes with things like the penalty kill not putting you in a hole. It comes with, I don't know if it was necessarily a mindset, but it certainly seemed at times last year where the Avs were like, oh, we gave up a goal or two, no big deal. will come back, which is fine because they can do it. But I personally would love to see more of a mindset this year of let's get ahead and let's stay ahead as the Colorado Avalanche. But do you guys feel the same way, or do you think the Avs can kind of function regardless?
I love to see them test it in the regular season from time to time because it's such an important tool to have at their disposal in the playoffs.
Fair
to
point.
Be able to find that second gear.
Yeah.
And I like to see it. Not every team is capable of being able to come back from behind. I don't know that it needs to happen with frequency in the regular season. I just think from time to time to make sure that they still have that in the bag. The other thing, though, like the Juice's comment about Miles Wood and penalties, they were the sixth most shorthanded team of the league, which I didn't feel like they were constantly on the penalty kill. But you're right. They're not necessarily doing themselves favors in that way. I think it all works together. And I'm impressed by what some of the stars in particular are able to do to help the team come back in those moments. But it sets everybody up for success if they don't put themselves in that position in the first place. Because that is when you're not playing your fourth line as much when the team is behind. You're icing the top guys, and their load is already pretty heavy. I want to see if Cal Ritchie's in the lineup. I want to see Cal Ritchie getting minutes. I want to see Kovalenko getting minutes. In the regular season, the stakes are still high, but not as high as they would be in the playoffs because I want them to get those opportunities. And I think it's just a cycle of putting a lot of pressure on the Stars, exhausting them through the regular season unnecessarily, where I want to see a more balanced attack and more opportunity given to some of these younger players, and they're not going to play if they're behind.
You want to know how to lessen the number of penalties? Get Landy back, and so you can duct tape McKinnon and Mikko's mouths shut so they stop swearing at the rest.
It's true. It's true. They're hotheads.
Well, and to add to that, is flow's a big part of the game. It is. It's a big part of the game. You go back and look at games, and you're like, wow, they were flat today. And then you look back, and there was a lot of penalties taken in the first period by both teams, and then there's no flow to the game, and then the fourth liners don't get out there. And then if you have a lot of PK and your PK guys like Mac don't kill, next thing you know, you're going to overplay them in the second period. Then who pays the pipe for that? It's your fourth line. It's your third line. It's just the way it is. It's human nature, right? So it does take away from the flow of the game. It does take you out of the game sometimes. And quite frankly, some guys can't recover. There's guys in this league that if they don't play, they don't have a good first period, you can mark it on the book or the coach's book that, you know what, write them off the rest of the game. And they usually get pushed aside because they know. And it's not just their fault. Like, it's not like, oh, he's got to be able to overcome that. Some people just can't. You know what I mean? Because you've been sitting there, you're cold as ice, you don't move, you're not into it. And some guys can't flip the switch and they struggle with it. And it's like, hey, you know, sometimes there's schedule losses out there. Well, sometimes it's like flow losses out there for players. I'm talking about individual, like a loss, like, oh my God, you just sucked. It's just the way it is. Then you're mad at yourself after the game. And it's like, but just the way the game developed. And you're right. You want to have a good PK, don't take penalties. And you want to have a good PK, and I'm not, and again, people are going to say I'm talking about Georgiev. You want to have a good PK, make a save. I'm talking about the rest of the league, not Georgiev, anyone. Your goalie, it's the old cliche, it's got to be the best it's got to be the best player out there. And you can be anything you want, you can do it perfectly, and if a freaking balloon gets in, then your numbers look bad, and it's like, man, come on. So at the end of the day, you want a good PK. Your goalie's got to be superb. He's got to be sharp, and he's got to embrace the challenge. You know what I mean? And the PK guys, and I know O'Connor does, and that's where he was a big freaking miss. The last few months of the season is they take pride in that. They got little chit chat meetings in the locker room. They have meetings before the game. They Mike Keane back then, Patty Waugh, they would take charge. It was crazy. And it's like they drove you nuts with their PK, but that's where games were won. Games are won, we all know, in the special teams. It's so important. So you can't discard it.
I don't think this would be a problem for the Avs, but it might be a problem for some other teams. Eric, I got a question for you. Who's in better shape this summer, you or Alex Ovechkin?
Yikes, I saw a picture. I can't throw stones. I mean, I can't. And I'll tell you something very funny, too. Like, hey, listen, I have the genes. It is what it is. Like, I used to be, and I used to play at, I don't know, start the season at 205, and I'd be, I don't know, maybe 199 by the end of the year. You know what I mean? Like on a playoff run or whatever it is, or quite frankly, sometimes I didn't make the playoffs, so maybe I balloon back up to 205 in the last few weeks of the season. But I'm telling you, I would just stop playing. I wouldn't do anything for 2-3 weeks. And then, I was one of those guys that kind of went hardcore in the summers. But in those 2-3 weeks, and this is no word of a lie, I would balloon up to about 240. And then I'd be like, okay, got to start working out again and eating well. So, I mean, it does go that quick. You know what I mean? And I feel for him. I saw a picture. Hey, he's got 800 goals. I mean, he can't freaking. I don't care. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, when you've been that good for that
How
long.
recent? I haven't seen a picture.
It was
of
like
him.
a month ago or so.
Oh, okay, 'cause
Yeah.
I just saw him playing soccer. He looked fine.
Yeah, there was a picture of him like on a beach or something a month ago, and
Oh,
he had a gut for sure.
good for him.
Not that, I'm sure even with a gut, he could shoot it harder than just about anybody else in the league,
God.
so it doesn't matter. But yeah, I mean, I think that covers most of the Avs' weaknesses.
I love it. And Alex
You
Ovechkin.
just had to get it in there. But if the reality is, yes, the Avs are far from a perfect team. No one's going to pretend they aren't. We rank the Avs pretty darn highly in our power ranking, though. We believe that they don't have that many
Number
weaknesses.
2.
Yeah, right. Unless you literally won the Stanley Cup, there are people here who think there aren't many teams better than the Avs. So
That's right.
it should be a fun year. It'll be interesting to see how they manage some of those weaknesses, especially the forward depth that we've talked about, how those things play out. But even for all the weaknesses, I think there's a lot of reason for confidence in the Avs this season. So hopefully things don't get completely derailed by unforeseen circumstance like too many injuries like we saw a couple of years ago. But honestly, yeah, it's August. Don't get ahead of yourselves. But for August, hard not to feel pretty good about where the Avs are, right?
Again, number 2 in the power rankings. I do believe I'll pick him again. I'll pick him to come out of the West. So, I mean, I'll say it now. I know it's not previews, but I do believe in their, for one reason. Number one reason, I believe in their superstars. I do. And for me, that's how you win in this game. And those guys are just absolute studs.
Jonathan Drouin comeback tour,
Hey, let's
second
go.
season. Casey Middlestat, a full year of him. I loved what they did at the deadline last year. Obviously, they weren't able to hold on to every single piece, but they are in such a competitive window. That's evidenced by how the team supported them at the deadline, and I feel like they've just, with the cap constraints in mind, tried to continue on with that through this offseason.
We all agree, right? Now that Patrick Laine is a Canadian, that he'll be an Av for cheap in 3 years?
No. No. He won't.
That's how that pipeline works, right? No, the one last thing I want to mention, which I guess is more of a news thing, I don't know if you guys talked about this yesterday, but the Avs hired a new assistant GM, in Andrew Wilson, who was a guy who used to work in the NHL Central Registry. I don't know him that well. I'm not going to pretend like I saw that name and went, oh, yeah, that guy. But does this feel a little bit like, hey, we went out and got a guy that should be able to help us with their cap situation?
He just even in the Avs press release, his credentials and outlining how well versed he is in the CBA. I absolutely think that is the purpose of it. They are in a unique cap situation as it is.
Yep.
They need to bring in an expert. So I love it. It just rounds out a really great team in that front office because I love what Kevin McDonald's doing with the Eagles and the development and the prospects. So I'm glad to just see it become an even fuller team of great people.
Yeah, and you look back, and even it's been years now that guys like Lou back then, Lamoriello went to the the NHL front office to I don't want to say poach, but get guys. And as it becomes more and more complicated over the years, the CBA and the cap constraints, all that kind of stuff. And Lou went and got Steve Pellegrini back then at the league, and I was one of the first guys that was hired to go work for a team. And now you've seen it a few times over the last 10 years or so, whatever it is. But, great hire. You know what? It makes you sleep better at night. If you're CMAC and It's a lot, and there's a lot of things you don't want to mess up. And the worst thing you can do is you look stupid the next morning on a technicality that wasn't taken care of. And I'm not saying that would be the
Okay,
case
Ottawa.
with Sunak. Well, but I was just going to say it's that quick, right? It's like a little omission and you're in trouble. So I do believe that that's a weapon. That's a weapon that I suck at it. I'll be honest. I'm not very good at it, and some guys are really good at it, and that's his background. He's been doing this now for a lot of years with the league, and it's going to be a perfect scenario for the Avalanche.
I hope so. I hope he's got a few tricks up his sleeve.
Cheat codes.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just kidding. No cheating.
That is going to be the end of today's show. We will be back tomorrow doing a top 10 NHL players right now. So if you want to argue for McKinnon 1 or Kale 1 or McDavid 1, we can do that. Should be a fun little list show. And then we got some more fun stuff coming up this week. Friday, we're doing a Q&A with Eric specifically. I'll probably put a tweet out tomorrow, but ask him about all of his professional funny stories and what it's like to be a pro out there. So Eric will do a lot of talking on Friday. So should be fun.
Love it.
Looking forward to it. Hope y'all enjoyed. Like and subscribe here on YouTube. Of course, you can follow us on your podcast platforms too. Go check out all of our other content on thednvr.com, and we will talk to you tomorrow.
We all silly like the mayor.